I think Amy's talked you out of a comment there, Ellen, but thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Ellen Blackman, thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Great to talk to you. And Amy Adams, thank you for joining us on the panel.
Thanks, Karen. It's been fun.
Coming up to Checkpoint with Lisa Owen. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for joining us. Good afternoon.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere aki nei, COVID compliance costs are killing businesses, according to some. New rules see essential workers crossing Auckland borders scramble to get mandatory weekly tests. Finally, there's a dip in Delta numbers. The squeeze goes on staff at Middlemore Hospital after 29 of them are forced to isolate. And the managed isolation facility that's ground zero for the whole outbreak reopens. Cyberattackers take down multiple New Zealand businesses in a coordinated attack. The beautiful blooms being binned at level 4 and lopping off the extra locks and fixing up the rude DIY jobs. Barbers are rushed off their feet in level 2 land.
Ahi Mari e RNZ News at 5, ko Sarah Thompson tōko ingoa. Thousands of truck drivers and other essential workers needing to move out of Auckland won't have to prove they are COVID-free for another week. From Friday, a new law requires essential workers who cross the level 4 border to show they have tested negative for COVID-19 in the previous 7 days. But the Ministry of Health has admitted spot checks for these tests won't happen until Friday next week. A spokesperson says this is so there is time to finalise arrangements for the testing. The ministry is also working to get saliva testing available for these workers, as well as nasal swabs. The National Party leader describes the handling of an undetected COVID-19 case at Middlemore Hospital as a mess. A man with the virus was unknowingly admitted on Saturday, causing 4 wards to close and 29 hospital staff to be stood down. 8 of the man's family members have tested positive for the virus, and the link to the wider community outbreak has not been found. Judith Collins says it is a failure on the government and Ministry of Health, who could have brought in rapid antigen testing at hospitals.
That's only 15 minutes to find out if the test shows up COVID. Then they could have actually taken more appropriate action. We're also hearing from staff at Middlemore about issues around their PPE or their personal protective equipment.
The Director General of Health says he doesn't think there's been any negligence by health authorities. And Dr Ashley Bloomfield is pleased with a big increase in the number of people getting COVID-19 tests. He says yesterday there were more than 13,000 swabs taken around the country, including 8,500 in Auckland. That's up from 2,500 tests out in Auckland on Saturday. There were 15 new cases of COVID-19 confirmed in the community today, all in Auckland. It brings the total number of cases in the latest outbreak to 855. New Zealanders trapped in New South Wales have been given another opportunity to come home, with a new so-called red flight planned for next week. The flight will depart Sydney for Auckland on Wednesday, and people have until 5 o'clock on Saturday afternoon to apply on the government's MIQ website for a seat. All travellers will have to present a negative COVID-19 test before departure and spend 14 days in a managed isolation or quarantine hotel. A similar flight carrying nearly 100 people arrived on Sunday. And the government has warned the Trans-Tasman bubble is unlikely to reopen in the near future. The COVID-19 Minister, Chris Hipkins, says while the situation is constantly under review, a decision is not expected in the short term.
The reopening is a while away. Of course, the discussions are ongoing. We keep that under constant review. But what we're seeing there, and of course what we're dealing with here, suggests that people shouldn't be holding their breath for borders between New Zealand and Australia to reopen in the immediate future.
The Trans-Tasman bubble was established in April and suspended in late July when Australia reported its latest outbreak. The government's spy agency overseeing cybersecurity has declined to comment on outages affecting several organisations today, citing security concerns and commercial confidence. Inland Revenue, Met Service, New Zealand Post, ANZ and Kiwibank were hit by what is believed to be a coordinated denial of service attack. All now appear to be back online. A spokesperson for the National Cyber Security Centre says it treats all incidents reported to it as commercially sensitive. Mexico's Supreme Court has ruled that criminal penalties for terminating pregnancies are unconstitutional. The ruling is for the northern state of Coahuila and is what Latin America's second largest Catholic nation. However, a judicial source says the decision will affect the whole of Mexico. One Supreme Court justice described the move as a historic step for the rights of women in Mexico. Organisers of the Alexandra Blossom Festival say they're gutted to have to cancel the event, which was meant to celebrate its 65th anniversary this month. Organisers say the festival in the central Otago town could only go ahead under Level 1. Event manager Martin McPherson says he is beyond disappointed, but the decision had to be made.
The sad news is after 64 years, there won't be a 65th. We've had to cancel our festival, which is the hardest call that I've had to make in 40 years in the entertainment industry.
The Alexandra Blossom Festival attracted more than 15,000 people last year. Moving into sports news now, a pair of young Canadians are through to the semi-finals at the US Tennis Open. After teenager Leylah Fernandez continued her dream run earlier today, 21-year-old Alex Auger-Aliassime has advanced to his first Grand Slam semi-final. The 12th seed went through after Spanish teenager Carlos Alcaraz retired injured during the second set of their quarter-final. Fernandez won in 3 sets over Ukrainian 5th seed Elena Svitolina and will play Belarusian 2nd seed Arina Sabalenka in the semi-finals. The Black Caps cricket coach Glenn Pocknell says confidence within the squad in Bangladesh is growing. The third-string New Zealand sides trails 2-1 in the 5-match T20 series, heading into tonight's 4th game in Dhaka. But Pocknell says the Black Caps were buoyed by a big win in Game 3.
It's a fine line, but it's them having belief in their method. You are going to fail a lot more than succeed in 2020, so having belief and trust in your method, it's trying to really instill that to them as often as we can.
And finally, the Olympic shot put champion Ryan Krause is chasing one of New Zealanders Tom Walsh's accolades. The pair will contest the Diamond League final in Zurich, where Walsh has won 3 of the last 4 titles. The winner picks up $42,000, as well as something Krause has never managed.
Can almost guarantee I'm probably the only 2-time Olympic gold medalist and world record holder that doesn't have a Diamond League trophy. So I'm hoping to put the capstone on what has been a year that I'm really proud of.
The field also includes Olympic silver medalist Joe Kovacs. And that's the news.
A COVID breach at Middlemore Hospital.
They've gone to work to do their job, and in the line of their duty they've been exposed to a highly contagious and dangerous disease.
No property surge as lockdown eases.
It's not a drop, just a slowdown of the rate of growth. And that's happened now for the 4th month running, so the market's clearly cooling.
And new strategies to protect our mangrove forests.
One of the beauties of working in mangroves is you quickly learn never to drop anything.
Picking it up. Morning reports weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Te reo irirangi o Aotearoa, funded through New Zealand On Air. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Rapare Thursday. Northland to Kapiti Coast, including Coromandel and the Central High Country. Showers, possibly heavy and thundery. Southwest gales from Auckland to Waikato until this evening. Isolated showers tomorrow. Bay of Plenty, Gisborne to Wairarapa and Wellington, also Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury. Showers today, possibly heavy, mainly fine tomorrow with increasing high cloud. Severe nor'west gales for the Canterbury High Country. North Otago, Central Otago and Dunedin, mainly fine with increasing high cloud. Heavy rain developing about the headwaters tomorrow and scattered rain spreading elsewhere in the evening. Southland and Clutha, also Bulla, Westland and Fiordland. Showers with snow to 300 metres in the south today. Rain developing in Fiordland tonight, spreading to southern Westland tomorrow and becoming heavy. Nor'westerlies rising to gale in the south. And for the Chatham Islands, showers possibly heavy with hail this evening. Fine spells tomorrow. That concludes the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Rapare Thursday. It's 8 minutes past 5.
Kia ora rā e ho, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. COVID compliance costs are killing small businesses. That's according to an Auckland company that believes a new mandatory weekly testing regime for essential workers crossing Auckland's border was sprung on them with little warning and zero consultation or planning. Daniela Watini and her husband own a small organic fertiliser company in South Auckland that employs 18 people, 10 of them truck drivers on the road today. New rules mean they and other essential workers crossing from Level 4 Auckland to regions in Level 2 must now have a weekly COVID test, and from next week they will have to show proof. Daniela Watini says they want to do their bit, but it's not as easy as it sounds, and it's hitting them hard in already empty pockets.
The main issue for me and for my staff is when and where and how do truck drivers get these tests done on a weekly basis? I spent a lot of time yesterday trying to contact people who do the testing to find out what times they're open and how I can do this. And it would appear most testing stations are open from 8 a.m. till 4 p.m, which is pretty limiting when you're a truck driver who starts generally between the hours of 6 and 7 and doesn't finish till the hours of 6 or 7 p.m. So truck drivers in general work long hours, and to get tested during the day is a major, major inconvenience.
So I know you will appreciate and understand that everyone needs to do their bit, but how could this be made easier for you guys to do your bit? What do you need?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I completely agree with the idea of testing over the border, and we need to do our bit, as does everybody. But we need a bit of clarity over this as to how it's all going to unfold, and B, are they going to have testing stations at the border or somewhere where truck drivers can drive through, because no testing stations that we've seen today can have a truck go through them.
How many of your staff are truck drivers?
So we've got about 18 staff, and we've got 10 that cross the border every day. Some of those 10, so about 4 of them live out of Auckland. They come into Auckland to load up, and when I say they come into Auckland, they're coming into just south of the Bombays. So they're not really coming into the heart of Auckland, they're just coming into the south of Auckland. But needless to say, they're still crossing the border, so they still are required to do these tests. And the rest of them are from Auckland travelling out down to Taupo.
So, Daniela, the ones that are coming from outside of Auckland in, I know you've done a bit of work on this. How hard is it to find a testing area outside of Auckland for the ones who live outside of Auckland?
Well, this is the thing. No one out of Auckland has COVID, apparently, so there's no pop-up station. So to get a test out of Auckland, you need to be going really to a health clinic. 90% of the doctors and health clinics won't COVID test you unless you are enrolled at their clinic. They also operate only between the hours of 8 and 4, and they only test for a small part of the day. So some of them allow between 1 and 3 that they do COVID testing. Some of them allow between 10 and 12. So there is nowhere for them to get tested during, other than outside of working hours. So I'm having to bring them into Takanini, to the pop-up testing station in Takanini. They're having to try and park their truck on the side of the road and then walk across and wait in line to get tested there.
So this is obviously for this week because they have to get it done, and then you're going to have to do it every week after.
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, it's probably for some of my boys, it's taken. I've had to deviate them off their route, so it's taken approximately 2 hours out of their day today to come into Takanini, to wait on the side of the road, to get tested, to get back in their trucks, to get back on the road and back onto their route that they were taking.
And
so that's coming out of my pocket, obviously. I'm having to cover the cost for that because I don't feel that my staff should have to pay for this. So I'm having to pay for their time to travel in. I'm having to pay the truck running costs. And we're also losing 2 hours of working time during the day, which could be revenue generating.
So is the only thing that's free the actual test?
Yes, yeah. And the people at Takanini testing station have been wonderful, and they've done everything. But I even had one of my truck drivers stop on the side of the road at the border today to talk to the police officer there, to ask them what it was that they needed to show to prove that they had a test. And the officer didn't actually know. He said, we don't even know at this stage. you can show us the negative test on your phone once you get the negative test. But other than that, they don't even have clarity around what they're expecting from us.
So, in the meantime, what are you doing? Do they just, carry a text message that says they've gone for a test?
Yeah, I've been very specific with all of my staff and said you need to, when you get your test, you need to get some sort of proof from them that you've had the test. The Takanini testing station are actually printing off like a medical certificate for us that says that they've had their test on what day, and that we're awaiting a negative result. And I think I managed to get one of the truck drivers into Ngatia Healthcare Centre yesterday, and they've done the same. So they've just printed them off a little medical certificate that says that they've had it taken.
What would be the solution for you guys? Would it be that they're given some kind of test at the border, but I'm picking not all of them get stopped at the border? Or do your trucks get weighed? Could they get tested at a weigh station? I mean, what is the answer here?
Well, I mean, we haven't really had long to prepare for this for a start off, but I guess, I mean, if they had a testing station near the border that was testing specifically for truck drivers, if the truck came through the border and there was a queue of 5 people, then pull over and get your test because it's convenient. It's only going to take you a 10-minute wait. If there's 30 trucks ahead of you, then you just keep going through and get the test later on. That's the only way I can see it working, is having a testing station at the border that is suitable for trucks.
So, Daniela, your issue is not with the fact that they need to be tested, not even with the fact that they need to be tested on a weekly basis. It's the fact that this is kind of, in your view, being sprung on you with, not a lot of thought going into how it will work. To
the how and where and who, this is coming out of somebody's pocket. It's going to be coming out of the business owners. And we're just getting whacked. Like, you just feel like every time you turn the news on, we're getting whacked with more and more compliance things that's just costing us time and money.
Tell me about that, Daniela. Tell me how stressful it is operating at a level 4 with the border around Auckland and your workers. I mean, how reliant are they on these jobs?
Well, they're completely reliant. I mean, most of my staff are the sole or main income earner to their family. So for me, I've got 18 staff. I mean, I don't lie awake at night worrying about dying of COVID. I lie awake at night worrying about having enough money in the bank to pay for these 18 staff and my insurance and the bank loans and all these other costs, because at the end of the day, I've got 18 staff, which is 18 families, that are relying on me to make enough money to pay them.
And that was Daniela Watene. It is 16 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. More on that mystery case at Middlemore Hospital now, which has sent several doctors and nurses into isolation and further exacerbated staffing shortages. But first, we have a dip in Delta cases today, 15 in total in Auckland, all of them. The Crown Plaza, the isolation facility believed to be ground zero for the Delta escape into the community, is reopening for guests. Now, that is despite an investigation failing to find the virus's exact route out. As mentioned, Middlemore Hospital needs reinforcements after 29 staff have been stood down. And that was 11 doctors, 13 registered nurses, because they came into contact with a COVID case. And that man was left on a ward with other patients while waiting on his test results. Now 4 wards are closed to new admissions. Ko taku manuhiri anai nei ko Chris Hipkins, COVID response minister. Tēnā koe e te minita. Let's start with Middlemore, shall we? How is that case linked to the current cluster?
Well, kia ora, Lisa. In terms of the case at Middlemore, the links are, there's still work underway to identify exactly where the linkage exists. My understanding is that there is a link. There's now over 855 cases in this cluster, so I haven't got the diagram showing the links between all of them, but I do understand that they have identified a probable link.
But you can't be more specific than that?
So I don't have that particular information in front of me.
We've just heard from a business owner, right? And a portion of their business is, freighting their goods. And they've been trying to get their ducks in a row for this new regime of testing. And it's a bit harder than it appears on the surface. And the business owner we spoke to says it takes a couple of hours out of each driver's day to try and get to a testing station. Bottom line, are you going to set up a testing station near the checkpoints for essential workers?
There'll be the team at the moment are working on making sure that testing is available to those people who do need to cross the border, working with a variety of the different peak bodies who represent employers, for example, who've got people travelling across the border, to make sure that we're setting up systems to allow them to comply that are going to actually meet their needs. So there are a range of different testing stations available now. If it's identified that there is that there are things that we can do to improve the situation to make it easier for people to get tests, then we'll certainly be doing that. And saliva testing can be a big part of this. It's a more comfortable test, and we're in a position now where we're out there trying to get that set up as quickly as we can for them as well.
Okay, so if you want to help them, they are saying they would like a testing station at the checkpoint. Are you going to do that?
Well, one of the things that the officials who are working on standing all of this up are testing is what is going to meet the needs of the biggest number of people. I can't guarantee that everyone will get everything that they want, but we'll certainly be taking industry feedback on board.
Okay, let's move on to the Crowne Plaza, right? It's reopening for returnees, and it's also going to be used to take people from the community who are close contacts and who need to isolate for 14 days. I mean, how many of those people do you have in hotel isolation at the moment?
We don't have as many as we set up for. I know I've got the numbers here in a piece of paper, and if I can find them, I'll give them to you. But we do, and we're expecting that there'll be fewer of them as the case numbers turn down. But we have, I don't have the number right in front of me, but we have had to accommodate a reasonable number of people over the course of this outbreak and who are in that situation.
Right, so they're going to be accommodated in the Crowne Plaza along with returnees. So is cohorting out the window?
No, but we can separate the Crowne Plaza into two different groups, if you like, put them all on different floors. So there'll still be a cohorting to a large extent, but they won't be in separate facilities.
Okay, so the advice to you in the briefing documents that were released today says unless you got that hotel back online by the 9th of September, you wouldn't have enough MIQ spots to honour existing vouchers and you may have to cancel some. The investigation didn't find the cause of the Delta leak, so I'm just wondering, did you bring this hotel back online even though you had a question mark over safety because you were under the pump for MIQ numbers?
No, in answer to your earlier question, I've now found the right number. We've got 30 close contacts currently isolating in 17 rooms in our MIQ facilities at the moment. Those are the community people who are isolating at the moment. The reason that the Crowne Plaza has been brought back on board is, yes, we do need it as part of our overall network. We're confident, based on a huge number of different reviews that have been done over the last couple of weeks, that it's safe to do that. Now, we wouldn't be doing that if we hadn't been told by all of the experts who have pored over it with a fine-tooth comb that it's safe to do so. Extra protective measures have been put in place there to be very, very cautious, but we are comfortable that it's safe to have people in there.
Okay, so you've repurposed a number of hotels that are now being used for COVID cases. This one is obviously being used for people who have to isolate for 14 days as well as returnees. Can you guarantee everyone who is booked into MIQ for September, October and November will not have their vouchers cancelled?
Yes, I can at this point. It's tight, but we have managed... At
this point, Minister, at this point are a vital three words. So what exactly does that mean?
If there was a massive surge in community cases that we needed to deal with, then that would put the system under even further strain. At the moment, everyone can see the daily case numbers are trending down, and that will suggest if that trend continues, we will be able to comfortably, but with pressure, accommodate all of the commitments that we've got for our MIQ facilities.
So you're giving a personal guarantee that you won't cancel those vouchers?
Well, not unless there's a very good reason to do that, and that would be, for example, if there was a massive outbreak and a sudden surge in community cases.
Because I'm been looking at a graph on MBIE's website that says by the end of September, the total number of rooms allocated exceeds your operational capacity, i.e. there is a shortfall. So how big is the shortfall and how are you going to sort that out?
So we have actually made some changes already, and I've spoken about them. We've deferred some RSE workers who were due to be coming in, and we have been looking at group bookings, and I think the latest I've had is that a group of fisher people who were due to come in have also been deferred, and so that frees up some more space, or helps.
How many is that, Minister?
Well, the RSE workers, it was several hundred. In the case of the fishermen, I think it was around 40 or 50. I don't have the exact number off the top of my head. But look, a lot of work has been done to make sure that everything can fit.
So you had previously said that you were going to rationalise group bookings, right? And you particularly named sport. And Grant Robertson told this program that he and other ministers had been asked to look at future bookings and basically look for some fat to cut, right? So is there anything else you are going to chop? Are there sports applications that you're not going to even consider for bulk bookings as a consequence of this tight squeeze on MIQ?
That would, to some extent, depend on how tight the situation stays and for how long. We do keep that under constant review, and it will also depend, in the case of people who are coming here for events, it'll depend on where those events were due to happen. I've had a look at the system. I don't think there's anything in the next few weeks, for example, for a large event in Auckland, because that would be pointless in people coming in. At the moment, from my recollection, there aren't any bookings that fall into group bookings that fall into that category in the next few weeks.
Novavax, right? We're getting a lot of that. First quarter of next year, you're anticipating, 5.3 million. Your office says that this vaccination is a strong contender for use as a booster shot. Why not stick with Pfizer?
Look, we have the option to do that. We have the option to use the Novavax vaccines that we've got coming, and we will have other options as well. That has always been the way we've approached vaccines, to make sure that we've got options, and that's what we'll be doing for next year too.
So I've just had, again, online, there is a vaccine checker that you can go in and you can load up a country and you can load up your vaccination and see if they will accept you based on that. Novavax isn't popular. A lot of countries don't want you if you've had Novavax. So again, why not stick with Pfizer, which is one of the most popular and accepted, rather than Novavax?
Novavax is still fairly early on in the process of going through all of its trials, its development and so on. It is being rolled out in some countries, but it's still early days for them. They weren't as fast to the market as vaccines like AstraZeneca and Pfizer and Moderna, for example. But we have to bear in mind that the science here will keep changing and the virus will keep changing, and we need to be able to be fleet-footed. So if other vaccines prove to be better to meet our needs next year and the year after, we have to be willing to adapt. So I don't want to lock us into a vaccine, to one particular vaccine, and thereby remove the options further down the track.
Thanks for your time. That is the COVID Response Minister, Chris Hipkins. It is 25 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Now, more on that mystery case at Middlemore Hospital now, which has sent several doctors and nurses into isolation and exacerbated staffing shortages. Katie Todd has the latest.
As health authorities try to pin down details about the patient and his 8 now infected family members, the message from Director General of Health Ashley Bloomfield today is one of reassurance. He says it's a low-risk event for the community.
I should say that they're having ongoing conversations with individual members of that family, in part to see if they can get to the bottom of how the first person in that household was infected and find the link to the wider outbreak.
As for the situation inside Middlemore Hospital, the Chief Medical Officer Dr. Pete Watson admits there were no rooms available on the ward to put the man into isolation as soon as he was suspected to have the virus. Nurses organisation Kai Whakahaere, Keri Nuku, says it's exposed a failing, under-resourced health system caught out unprepared for COVID-19.
This is the frustrating part of this, is we knew it was inevitable, but we were certainly not prepared. And prepared meant about having adequately resourced, functioning wards where there were plenty of staff.
While County's Manukau District Health Board is reviewing the incident, Dr. Bloomfield says he doesn't think there's been any negligence, and Health Minister Andrew Little says the hospital is well placed to deal with the virus. Dr. Pete Watson has defended the hospital's front door screening process, saying there was no way to know the man, who had abdominal pains, had COVID-19. Abdominal pain is now being checked in the COVID questionnaire. But National Party leader Judith Collins calls the situation a mess. She says the number one item which should be available for hospitals is rapid antigen testing for COVID-19.
That's only 15 minutes to find out if the test shows up COVID. Then they could have actually taken more appropriate action.
Green Party leader James Shaw also thinks the situation could have been avoided.
As long as you understaff and underpay those staff that you do have, you're going to run the risk of a high error rate.
And so does ACT leader David Seymour.
There are also major problems with adequate PPE not being worn by staff who were going in and out and around that ward. So those are significant problems.
Executive Director of the Association of Salaried Medical Specialists, Sarah Dalton, says rostering staff into separate pods and cutting down patient numbers has minimised the impact of the case. But she can also think of a few ways that Middlemore Hospital could have been better prepared.
The antiquated state of hospital facilities, the need to rely on shared rooms with only curtains between, the lack of negative pressure rooms, really is exposing our hospitals as very vulnerable should admissions for COVID or with unknown COVID increase.
The Northern Region Communications Centre did not respond to RNZ's questions about how many staff they're trying to bring in to cover those who are stood down and how many patients are being deferred. Staff are already being brought in from around the country to cover shortages in Auckland.
It is 29 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Spring has sprung at the same time as level 4, forcing Auckland's flower growers to bin months of their work. Under alert level 2, they aren't able to sell or distribute their goods, but can't simply stop their flowers growing. They're desperately calling for the government to allow them to operate with contactless deliveries or to be allowed to sell to other essential businesses. Reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi went to visit some of them.
So this crop here, we have waited 4 months for this to get to this stage, and we will start picking this on Friday this week. And in about 2 weeks this will all be done and dusted. Yeah, and with us likely not coming out of level 4, this is yet another lot of wasted flowers, good for nothing.
This is the reality sisters Nicola and Jenna have been facing since lockdown began more than 3 weeks ago. They've been running Bright Bloom's flowers for 20 years together in Kumeu, mostly growing gerberas, dianthus green tracks and mathiolas. Every few days they're dumping van loads full of crops in a compost heap. That would usually be sent off to auction 3 times a week.
Over 10,000 stems so far, and
the next week will be thousands more.
That's coming on. So if we went longer than the 4 weeks, we'll lose well over 20,000 stems.
Financially, they'll never recover.
We're looking at over 50,000, and that's only if we come out of lockdown when, next week. It's going to be more. That, I'd like to say, that is not profit. There's a lot of costs out of that 50,000 that are gone. Only a small amount of that is actually profit. Huge amount is all your fertilising, your heating, your seed, your cost of growing it on. So it's definitely not profit. But just to get your costs back alone, you just never will.
It's taking its toll.
We are really struggling to keep our morale up and keep coming in here every day and dealing with this. It's a struggle. A real struggle, and it's starting to take its toll on our families watching us have to deal with this. Our children are seeing it, and it's tough.
Along with dozens of other growers, they're asking for change.
So if we could safely sell contactless, whether it be to local or whether it be to essential operations like supermarkets, fruit stalls, we'll never be able to recover everything, but if we can sell some of our product, otherwise it would have to be compensation for what we've lost.
For smaller growers like Hands in the Dirt, run by Isla Morgan Guthrie in Ahu Ora, it's a similar story.
There's all the flowers here. So these ones here we're binning, they're no longer any good. We can't sell them, we can't give them away. So they're about to go in the compost heap. And then we just did another harvest today of tulips, ranunculus, poppies, daffodils. and they're just sitting in the barn at the moment. I'm not too sure what I'm going to do with them right now. Don't really have any space in the house, so I'd say they'll just sit here for another week or so until they get chucked out.
She usually relies on regulars and a few retail outlets, all based in Auckland, to purchase her stock. She says it would be easy to deliver them contactless, like other businesses.
Because a lot of us have our own delivery vehicles, so we can basically cut out the couriers, all of that, and just go and supply direct to our customers. For me, flowers is soul food, and it's been quite sad in the fact that I've had a lot of essential workers contacting me, pleading for flowers. They just want something to kind of brighten their day or keep them optimistic, and to not actually be allowed to give them that when I have the flowers has been quite upsetting. It feels quite unfair.
Now time is running out, and so is space. And because growers have to plant ahead, their summer crops are also in jeopardy, with items like seed mixes unavailable in level 4. The next few weeks could be the make it or break it for growers.
I feel like there will be quite a few flower farmers that just won't be able to continue. You know, I start to question whether I am able to do this.
In a statement, the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment said it was unable to answer any specific questions relating to individual products or retailers. And having too many businesses operating during Alert Level 4 increases the odds of transmission, with workers moving in and out of their home, and increases the potential chain of infection.
Well, homai o whakaro, would love your feedback. Nō reira anei na kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. Flowers, they bring people so much joy, yet, well, thousands of them are just simply going to waste. And if you were listening to that on radio, do go online and check out the pictures, because they are absolutely beautiful, from that piece from Louise and Marika there. And I'm wondering, are flowers allowed at funerals at the moment? And if you want them, where do you get them from? Let us know your feedback on that. Pātui mai, what could we do with them? Should they allowed to be sold through contactless delivery? Text me on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Kia ora e te iwi e haere nei i a Checkpoint. They're locked down in level 4 in tornado-trashed houses. We head back to Papatoetoe to see how repairs are going. The coordinated cyber hit that took down a number of New Zealand businesses, and the wage subsidy bill cracks $1 billion this time around. Time for the headlines now. Anea Sarah Mina Pitapita Kōrero.
Kia ora, Lisa. RNZ News headlines. Ko Sarah Thompson tōku ingoa. Thousands of truck drivers and other essential workers needing to move out of Auckland won't have to prove they are COVID-free for another week while health officials finalise arrangements. From Friday, a new law requires essential workers who cross the level 4 border to show they have tested negative in the previous 7 days. The COVID-19 response minister told Checkpoint they are trying to get saliva testing set up as well as swabs. Nationals leader describes the handling of an undetected COVID-19 case at Middlemore Hospital a mess. A man with the virus was unknowingly admitted on Saturday, causing 4 wards to close and 29 hospital staff to be stood down. 8 of the man's family members have tested positive. Judith Collins says the government and Ministry of Health could have brought in rapid antigen testing at hospitals. A fire in an overcrowded jail in Indonesia has killed at least 40 people. A government spokesperson says the blaze started at the prison near Jakarta in the early morning. The authorities are still evacuating the facility. New Zealanders trapped in New South Wales have been given another opportunity to come home, with a new so-called red flight planned for next week. The flight will depart Sydney for Auckland on Wednesday. People have until 5 o'clock on Saturday afternoon to apply on the government's MIQ website for a seat. And the government has warned the Trans-Tasman bubble is unlikely to reopen in the near future. A COVID-19 minister says while the situation is constantly under review, a decision is not expected in the short term. And finally, a sinkhole on State Highway 6 in Stoke is causing significant delays to Nelson drivers. Nelson City Council is urging people to avoid the area if at all possible, or otherwise delay their journey. Traffic is down to 1 lane, and the road near Saxton Field will be closed overnight so contractors can replace a culvert that collapsed into a stream. Those are your headlines. Our next news update is at 6.
Nā mihi Sarah, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa I nai nei, ko Nona Peltier, who joins us to talk business. Nona, specialty milk producer Synlait is restructuring its business. What are they up to?
Well, they're planning to cut jobs as part of this restructuring, so 150 jobs as a matter of fact. And that's going to be a reduction in their workforce. They say that basically they have people in the wrong parts of their business and they need to beef up other parts of it. And so one of the things they've talked about is that it's more than just saving money. It's going to save them, between $10 and $12 million a year. That's the job losses, I suppose. But the company is still warning of a full year loss of 20 to 30 million. And that's because, of course, of the problems associated with their biggest customer, that's A2 Milk. They've had too much stock, weaker sales, and supply disruptions. So, yeah, you can expect to see some changes at Synlait. And, of course, they're going to be reporting a loss at the end of the month.
No, there's a survey that suggests companies can attract more investment if they improve their environmental, social and governance policies. How so?
It's an interesting one, and this is some research that was done by the Responsible Investment Association of Australia. They found that ethical funds, so those are the ones that conform to people's align better to their ethics and so on, increased 28% to $142 billion last year. Now, Stefan Berridge from Kiwi Wealth says investors should actually look at the irresponsible companies, the ones that are now adopting these types of policies, because they'll show the biggest growth. So if you're looking around and you want to make an investment, look for companies that are starting to see things your way. And those will probably end up being quite good investments for you, because when they do adopt these environmental, social and governance policies, they just perform better.
Nona, shall we have a quick, trot around the markets?
Yeah, so look, I guess the market it fell nearly 1% today, 129 points down to 13,193. And that's really in line with what we're seeing in Asia. There is a lot of concern there. We've talked about this before, and it's about Delta and, of course, the slowing economic growth that goes with that. The New Zealand dollar, though, is steady at 71 US cents, 96.2 Australian and 51.5 pence.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier there with our business news. Cyberattackers have taken down multiple New Zealand websites and services in what appears to be a coordinated hit. New Zealand Post, Inland Revenue and Met Service all experienced blackouts. Kiwibank and ANZ customers also reported problems with internet banking and being locked out of their accounts. And the government's computer emergency response team, CERT New Zealand, confirmed it's monitoring multiple denial of service attacks. AU2 Professor of Computer Science Dave Parry joins us now. What's going on, Dave?
Well, it's very similar to the attacks that happened previously this year. Effectively, what's happening is that attackers, presumably criminal gangs, are effectively setting up lots of these bots, as they're called, which is computers that they are controlling by inserting a virus into them, and those are all over the world, and they're basically hitting these websites and these public sites with lots of requests, so much so that the website can't cope with it, and then it can't provide service to anybody. And effectively what's happening is that the way they do this is that they attack you and then they ask for some ransom money.
Dave, you're on an awfully crackly phone line then, so I'm wondering if I can just get you to, adjust the handset and we'll see if we can get a better line going, because we want to hear what you've got to say. Do you think, do you reckon they'll be aware of the fact that we're in lockdown, in Auckland at least, and the rest of the country until this morning, and they want to hit us when it hurts, because we're all on the internet, we're all using those kinds of services?
Yes, there will be certainly that sort of thing happening. These guys are constantly monitoring for weaknesses in both security, so they're constantly probing sort of people's websites, but they're also looking for sort of events that are happening which may persuade people to be more vulnerable, or whether they're more likely to sort of respond to phishing attacks, or in this case, that yes, anyone in lockdown is going to be using the internet a lot more, so it's a good time to attack if you're doing that sort of thing.
I'm interested in also that, customers are reporting issues with two banks, right? I mean, wouldn't the expectation be that they would be an absolute fortress?
Well, the problem is, of course, that what happens with this situation is that the way that you defend against these attacks is you effectively identify that the requests are suspicious somehow. Now, they might call this a signature file or some sort of characteristic. Now, they will do that, but they also don't want to block out legitimate requests. And so, particularly for banks, they're in quite a difficult position because, of course, people want to have the transactions going on, and you don't want to be blocked from doing a transaction because the bank suddenly halfway through the transaction says, well, I'm not sure about your computer anymore. Maybe I'll block you for a bit. So the banks have got quite a delicate balancing act, and quite often in this situation, what happens is that the banks sort of deliberately reduce the amount of service they're providing over the internet or whatever in order to be able to manage it better. So it's not really an indication that the banks aren't doing their job. It's an indication that the banks are being careful so that they're not putting people in a really bad position, which would be halfway through a transaction, you're not connected to the bank anymore.
The other thing is so many people working at home, right, Dave, on remote devices and what have you. Is there any suggestion that this is potentially what could have put these systems and businesses at risk?
Probably not particularly. I mean, quite sort of truthfully, I think in the COVID world where so many people are working from home, then security tends to go down. So people use, they share computers, they use the Wi-Fi that's local, and they do all sorts of things. The kids are on the same network, etc. And so I think there's probably some sort of effect happening that there would be in some of the places where the computers are being hijacked to attack. That more of those are happening because of COVID and because it's more working at home. And that's probably one of the things that's happening in the US at the moment. A lot of these attacks are coming from US-based computers. The gangs aren't based in the US, but they're capturing computers in the US and then using those computers to attack New Zealand. So there will be some effect of that, definitely.
Good to talk to you, Dave. That is Dave Parry, AUT Professor of Computer Science. I'm a bit worried he might have a gremlin in his phone. Nearly 4 months since June's deadly tornado ripped through the Auckland suburb of Papatoetoe, many properties still resemble bomb sites. And now Auckland's prolonged level 4 lockdown is causing further upheaval for residents desperate to get their battered houses repaired. Our reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe returned to Papatoetoe.
Driving down some of Papatoetoe's scarred streets, the destruction is still obvious. Many houses sit deserted on this wet Wednesday, repairs half finished, roof tiles strewn across lawns, leaving homes raining on the inside too.
Some houses here on Freiburg Ave in Papatoetoe remain uninhabitable. I'm walking up to Carla Makiha's house, which was red-stickered following that devastating tornado back in June. It's still completely shrink-wrapped. You can't enter this place. Its windows and doors are completely boarded up. And there are still some signs of devastation along the street. There are things like fences down, there's debris scattered around the road and footpath. I'm now looking at some houses across the road from Carla's. They're surrounded by scaffolding. Their roofs are also not fixed. They're still covered in shrink wrap.
Months after that terrifying twister ripped through her family home, Carla Makiha's rebuild was finally starting to pick up steam.
So we finally had some movement with the finances, which has been really positive.
Now, once again, they're in limbo. First, the tornado. Now 3 weeks and counting of COVID-19 lockdown.
So we had an appointment with the builder on the Wednesday, the day after we went into lockdown. So what he was coming to do was do his report to look at where to from here. And now we're in level 4, which has put a handbrake on everything, which is, it's life.
The family's lucky enough to have secured a rental after spending time in cramped emergency accommodation. But with their house rebuild stalled, they're simply rolling with the punches, dreaming of that day they'll finally be allowed back in.
They're still there, the tarps are still there. There's some framing around some of the houses, but it's not an easy process, and it's certainly not a fast process.
We take a drive out of Freiburg Ave across Puhanui Road to another tornado-ravaged street where a block of 5 dwellings are still without a roof. The windows blown out, the bucketing rain soaking anything left inside.
We've just driven around the corner to a block of 5 flats on Fitzroy Street in Papatoetoe, and these buildings were, well, among the hardest hit following that devastating tornado. And I'm walking alongside the mess that still remains. There's bits of twisted metal that have been picked up and swirled around and chucked on the ground. There's bits of wood that have been split and scattered everywhere. I'm seeing things like household items like pots and pans and pushchairs, and the debris. There's still big trees and bits of bark that have been scattered around the place. In fact, looking at this, it appears not much has changed at all since late June.
On adjacent Hayward Road, we pull up to a battered flat that used to house 6 flatmates, including Jas Olark, who back in June told us the property had been rendered unlivable.
Can't sleep inside because it will suddenly fall down anytime.
Fast forward nearly 4 months and the property languishes in a state of disrepair. The roof rebuild has begun, but tarps appear to have blown off, allowing water to seep through a gaping hole. Contractors' trucks sit abandoned on site, a scene frozen in time due to Auckland's lockdown. Incredibly, just one door down, Jatinda Tapia's house was relatively untouched.
This situation as of today, most of my house is fixed up. I'm a little bits and pieces are still left out, like roof is fixed up. You can see the elevation is got fixed, paint has been done, but the interior is little bit left.
He feels for his neighbours, especially now their rebuilds have stalled.
Yeah, level 4, you know it's for everybody, level 4 now, like a corona. But the things have stopped because construction in the industry has stopped because of the level 4. But as soon as the level 4, the restrictions get eased, I hope the things will again resume back to the work. So, yeah.
For now, these streets lie deserted. Building sites sit abandoned as families are forced to wait for lockdown to lift.
Well, if you were listening to that on radio, you can check out that piece from our two Nicks. It'll be on our Facebook page where you can see the video. It is about 10 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. After 6 o'clock, we'll have more on mandatory testing for workers crossing Auckland's borders. Now, some of you have got in touch about the interview we did earlier with Daniela Watene, who has 10 staff who are truck drivers and they're going across the border. She says she wants to comply, but it's pretty tough. A lot of support for her. This person says, please thank the woman you were talking to about tests at the Auckland border. She's right onto it and trying to do everything right. Thank you from us outside of Auckland, who she is keeping safe. Another listener says, totally feel for Daniela Watene. We employed 6 people and felt the responsibility of making sure our business was profitable to ensure we could continue to pay staff and provide for their families. The costs involved in lockdowns to small businesses are not easily absorbed. Thanks for your feedback. Do keep it coming. You can text us on 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The government's wage subsidies bill has tipped $1.2 billion as businesses across the country begin to enjoy some freedoms of lower alert levels. The spend pales in comparison to last year's wage subsidies, which totalled more than $13 billion. Business leaders say that's due to a change in eligibility requirements, but also attitudes to public money. Nita Blake-Person reports.
When the latest lockdown hit, New Plymouth business owner Tanya Farrant feared the worst.
Not knowing, how long it was going to go on for and where we were going to be able to pay our bills, it was quite daunting. And to be honest, it was really daunting when you went into it because then the bank account got stripped because the bills are still coming out, but there was no revenue coming in. So it was quite scary watching that happen.
It's the first year she's run the deluxe diner and she worried the wage subsidy might not cover 100% of her staff costs.
Mark and I really want to look after our staff and that's a really big thing for us. So being able to pay them, 100% of their usual wages is really important to us, and that government subsidy just helped big time.
Her business has received some of the $1.2 billion paid out in wage subsidies so far this lockdown. That's supporting more than 838,000 employees, 117,000 self-employed people and 242,000 businesses. The highest number of supported workers are in construction, followed by food and hospitality. The bill is large but not a patch on the $13 billion that was paid out in last year's subsidies. Kirk Hope of Business New Zealand says that's partly down to the stricter criteria. Businesses have to have had a 40% drop in revenue compared to 30% last time.
A lot of those businesses will still need some assistance, and there will be businesses who legitimately would need assistance, but still couldn't meet the terms of the wage subsidy.
Many of the big businesses that claimed tens of millions of dollars last year have not applied this time around. Air New Zealand is one of the largest recipients at $8.5 million, and Burger King has received $1.8 million. But Kirk Hope says many small businesses are in a worse position this year than they were last time.
Some of those businesses would have done 5 extremely long, 2 national lockdowns and 3 alert level changes in Auckland, so they would have done it pretty hard 5 times. So they won't have financial resilience left.
He wants to see more sector-specific support for those businesses which are limited right up until level 1. Accounting professor Gilnot Wong has been studying business behaviours around the wage subsidies and says some learned a lot from the public response to their claims last time.
Public monitoring and the thrashing that they got in the media made them well aware that people are keeping an eye on them, because it's effectively what I describe as a wealth transfer that goes from one party to another, and they are the recipients of the wealth transfers when they shouldn't be getting it.
He says the government needs to be more careful with money before it's handed out and suggests forgivable loans might be a better option if government assistance is needed at all.
What have not been discussed are the other criteria, like whether you have a banking facility that you could draw down on, whether you have cash reserves available that you can draw down on. If you look at some of these public companies, in the last year, despite the lockdown, they actually had increased their cash.
Deluxe Diners' Tanya Farron says lockdowns affect small businesses very differently as they don't have reserves to draw on. But she's pleased big businesses have been able to cope. The government has yet to take any legal action following on from last year's wage subsidies, but 5 companies have been contacted about repaying money they're not entitled to.
The chance to step out of the living room and get a dose of retail therapy was snapped up by Wellingtonians today, who emerged into the freedom of level 2. People have been out and about again for reasons other than the state-mandated trot around the block. Our reporter Jake McKee and cameraman Samuel Rillstone went to see how people feel about alert level 2 in the days of Delta.
It's level 2, but with a twist. While people have more freedoms, they still have to wear a mask inside retail stores.
Alert level 2 is in full swing here at North City Shopping Centre in Porirua. Everyone's got their masks on, but social distancing a little bit questionable. Most people are here to just pick up those things they couldn't buy at levels 3 and 4, but for some people it's purely a social trip. They're here to see their friends and expand their bubble a little bit.
There's a lot of queues at the shops. Luckily I got here early enough that I didn't have to queue.
A bit more freedom, so it allows me to actually get out and do the things that I need to do.
I guess I am wary of, the risks that are out there. So I try not to go out unless I really need to.
Tanya Balfour was at the mall with her daughter, getting some jobs done that haven't been possible over the last few weeks.
My daughter has got new glasses and she needs them fitted, so we've got to stop in and get them fitted around her ears.
She says the chance to get the kids out of the house is good, but she's finding the new mask wearing rules a little bit strange.
When we were at alert level 2 last time, we didn't have to wear masks at malls and stuff, so it does feel weird to be out and about with everybody, but I guess it's just the new normal.
Friends Lindsay and Vicky were happy to reunite after weeks apart, but Lindsay says being back at level 2 is a bit overwhelming.
There's so much to do. There's all the appointments, the dental appointments, and
the car, things you need to get done to the car, all those things, and so many people wanting to catch up with you.
Vicky says she's focused on reminding herself to scan in and wear her mask, which she's not a huge fan of.
It's hard wearing a mask all the time, but it's safe, and that's the way I want to be. I don't want to be back in lockdown again and level 4, and I don't want to have to, be tighter restrictions.
Terence Grundy's here to buy new video games. He's not too fussed about the new level 2 rules and says it is what it is.
I was kind of confident with the government and how they've been handling it. It seems they've been cautious anyway, and at some stage we have to move down, and I think it was the right timing to move down. But I'm aware that something can happen and we probably will go up, so I'm ready for that as well.
Rangi Piwari is happy to be at level 2, getting back to appointments that were cancelled at levels 3 and 4. But she's treading with caution and hopes others are too, so we can eventually get back to whipping around the shops without a mask.
It's about ensuring that the safety of our whānau, the safety of our elders, our tamariki.
But all up, people seem pretty pleased with how the level 2 rules are being followed.
More or less, people are observing the rules, aren't they?
It takes one person to get this thing moving. So we've got to take the precautions.
A welcome return to level 2 for most people, and a hope that levels 3 and 4 are behind them.
And if you want to watch Jake and Sam's piece, head to our website or our Facebook page. And after 6, spare a thought for hairdressers in level 2 land. They've been very busy today, tidying up some wild mains and some dodgy DIY jobs. We'll have that for you after 6. You feel very strongly about flowers, by the way. Judy says, I am in Christchurch and have been able to purchase flowers from local growers online during level 3. Maybe it's because they're on level 4 in Auckland, they're not able to sell online. Other so-called essential goods are able to be sold during level 4, so why not flowers? To me, flowers are essential and perishable, so should be able to be sold as they cannot be stored on a shelf, says Judy. Fiona's got in touch to say, I definitely think flowers should be on the yes list, just as helpful as a glass of wine to cheer up the house, and they last longer. They're probably healthier too, Fiona. Please, government, I love what you're trying to do, but say yes to flowers in level 4, says Fiona. Thanks for the smiley face, Fiona, too. And this person says, flower growers, well, unfortunately, any trade requires more movement, which equals more connection between people. And if flowers get turned into essential businesses, then what else? They say with 3 question marks. We already have people selling cupcake and biscuit pre-packaged mixes. Phil says the bureaucratic response to the issues raised by flower growers and the ill-thought-out border testing requirements for drivers are a snapshot of why we should have a standalone COVID response agency run by and through experienced business people and scientists. There is a bizarre black and white approach removed from reality to this thing, which frankly beggars belief and is destroying our economy.
Ahi Marie, RNZ News at 6, ko Sarah Thompson tōku ingoa. The arrival of hundreds of seasonal workers from other countries and dozens of fishery workers has been deferred to make more space in managed isolation. By the end of this month, the total number of MIQ rooms allocated is predicted to exceed capacity. The COVID-19 response minister, Chris Hipkins, told Checkpoint he couldn't rule out sport and other group booking applications being declined to free up rooms.
That would, to some extent, depend on how tight the situation stays and for how long. We do keep that under constant review, and it will also depend, in the case of people who are coming here for events, it'll depend on where those events were due to happen.
Chris Hipkins says over the next few weeks, there don't appear to be any large bookings that fit into that category. A small business owner is slamming the new mandatory testing regime, saying testing is inaccessible. From Friday, essential workers who cross the level 4 border from Auckland must show they have tested negative for COVID-19 in the previous 7 days. South Auckland business owner Daniela Watsini told Checkpoint her small fertiliser company employs 10 truck drivers. She says getting them tested is proving to be a mission, with drivers sacrificing hours to go off-route to get to testing stations.
So I'm having to pay for their time to travel in, I'm having to pay the truck running costs, and we're also losing 2 hours of working time during the day, which could be revenue generating.
Daniela Watene says a testing station dedicated to truck drivers at the border would be an ideal solution. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Health now says spot checks for drivers crossing the border won't happen until Friday of next week. The government's wage subsidies bill has passed $1.2 billion. The payout is supporting 838,000 employees, 117,000 self-employed people and 242,000 businesses. The highest number of supported workers are in the construction industry, followed by food and hospitality. Many of the recipients are smaller businesses, but larger businesses have also received funding, including $8.5 million to Air New Zealand and $1 million to Burger King. Kiwi Bank will reverse fees for customers charged as a result of a cyber attack that crippled its website today, along with those of several government agencies. A Kiwi Bank spokesperson says intermittent problems are continuing with its website, internet banking, banking app and phone banking. The bank has told customers who have been charged dishonour fees or other penalties as a result of the problems it will repay them, although it may take a couple of days. Inland Revenue, Met Service, New Zealand Post, ANZ and Kiwi Bank were also affected by what is believed to be a coordinated denial of service attack. The Green Party member of a cross-party group on mental health says less talk and more action is needed to address mental health needs in the community. A petition signed by more than 13,000 people demanding the government increase the number of mental health workers has been handed to Parliament. Green MP Chloe Swarbrick received the petition and says urgent action is needed.
And the Psychology Workforce Task Force group estimated that an additional 268 psychologists were needed across the 20 DHBs and about 672 more in the primary health and general practice sector to adequately address the need that already exists, let alone that comes forward as we build more of that awareness around this pothole.
The petition organisers want the number of psychologists trained each year to be doubled and internships and training adequately funded. The United States has criticised the composition of Afghanistan's new interim government, which includes people accused of mass killings. A State Department spokesperson expressed concern that it only includes Taliban members and close associates. He also criticised the fact that despite the Taliban having promised an inclusive government, no women or figures from minority communities have been named so far. 2 people are in a critical condition following a serious crash in Clevedon in southeast Auckland. Police are at the scene on North Road, which is closed between Maraetai Coast Road and Mark Williams Drive. Moving into sports news now, the All Blacks utility Geordie Barrett is all smiles after avoiding further punishment from his red card against Australia. Barrett was sent off during last week's test in Perth when his boot made contact with the face of Wallabies winger Marika Koroian-Betty after jumping to catch a high kick. A Sanzar judiciary last night cleared Barrett to play in Sunday's test against Argentina, and he says he's grateful to avoid further sanction.
It was a long process, very thorough. A couple of South Africans and one Argentinian on the panel, and yeah, they handled it very well. The integrity of the process, and I guess I'm just wrapped with the outcome, and they could see that I had no, intent to hurt Marika in the game. He's a well-respected opponent. I'm happy that he's come away with no serious injuries.
2 young Canadians are into the semi-finals at the US Tennis Open, their first Grand Slam semi-final. Teenager Leylah Fernandez outlasted Ukrainian 5th seed Elena Svitolina over 3 sets. 21-year-old Felix Auger-Aliassime, the 12th seed, went through after Spanish teenager Carlos Alcaraz retired injured in the second set of their quarterfinal. And finally, Black Caps coach Glenn Pocknell says they'll need several players to stand up again if they're to level their T20 cricket series in Bangladesh tonight. New Zealand trailed 2-1 in the 5-match T20 series after a bounce-back win in Game 3. Pocknell says in T20 cricket, a team effort is required.
They'll all have their day, and a lot of them have had their day so far in these first 3 matches, and I guess that's what we're going to look to do moving forward. If we can have more of our players having their day, then we'll be in a good position.
Tonight's 4th T20 starts at 10 o'clock, and that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, former Prime Ministerial Science Advisor Sir Peter Gluckman on a new report into the effects of screen time on children's emotional, social and cognitive development. He's not talking about the Brady Bunch. It's time to revisit an interview from nights gone by with photographer Birgit Krippner and her voyage across the Pacific on a container ship, or this week's Hump Prize is something you drink rather than read, on nights of Meet Brian Crump after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Te reo irirangi o Aotearoa, on air, online and on demand. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Apare Thursday. Northland to Kapiti Coast, including Coromandel and the Central High Country. Showers possibly heavy and thundery. Southwest gales from Auckland to Waikato until later tonight, and isolated showers tomorrow. Bay of Plenty, Gisborne to Wairarapa and Wellington, also Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury. Showers tonight, possibly heavy, mainly fine tomorrow with increasing high cloud. Severe nor'west gales for the Canterbury High Country. North Otago Central Otago and Dunedin, mainly fine with increasing high cloud. Heavy rain developing about the headwaters tomorrow and scattered rain spreading elsewhere in the evening. Southland and Clutha, also Buller, Westland and Fiordland. Showers with snow to 300 metres in the south tonight. Rain developing in Fiordland, spreading to southern Westland tomorrow and becoming heavy. Nor'westerlies rising to gale in the south. And for the Chatham Islands, showers possibly heavy with hail tonight. Fine spells tomorrow. That concludes the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Apare Thursday. It's 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Sarah. No mai hoke mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Truck drivers and other essential workers crossing Auckland's boundary are preparing to get weekly nasal swabs, even though saliva testing is widely used for border workers. On Friday, the new testing regime starts, which requires every essential worker leaving Auckland's Level 4 boundary to show a negative result from the last 7 days. At this stage, the thousands of truckies are lining up at public testing stations, which they say is delaying deliveries. Anei te kai ripoata, Jordan Bond.
Saliva testing is as accurate as a nasal swab. It can be taken at home by anyone at any time and then sent off for processing. Here's a Ministry of Health promo video from their website featuring a border worker who used to be nasal swabbed but now uses a saliva test.
I found the latter to be quick, very convenient and painless. You can do it at any time of the day or night to fit in with your work. The whole process can be completed in less than a minute.
From Friday, the government is mandating essential workers leaving Auckland's Level 4 boundary to be tested once a week. But at this stage, they can only use nasal swabs, which have to be taken at a testing centre. Nick Leggett from the Road Transport Forum says this will slow the whole supply chain down.
Sending a truck driver to a testing station, and we had a truck driver yesterday in Auckland who was waiting for over 2 hours for a test, that comes off their legal driving hours. And if we do that to too many drivers, we are going to delay the delivery of freight.
He's hopeful saliva testing can be used, but there's not been a clear answer from the government.
We are awaiting details of that. It's unclear at this stage who the preferred Ministry of Health saliva testing agent will be and how that can then be rolled out to trucking operators to complete the testing on their staff.
So, at this stage, they're off to the testing stations. Alan McDonald from the Employers and Manufacturers Association says the industry and government agencies seemed a bit surprised when this was announced. He says there's no system in place to administer this.
Yesterday I heard some truck drivers and others went to testing stations to go and get their test, and they were turned away because they didn't have symptoms. I think this is an example of having an idea and trying to do policy on the fly without having the process in behind it and having thought through how it's actually going to work.
He says agencies have told them they will smooth out the process before the requirements take effect. He thinks it's unlikely that'll be before Friday and that the implementation of the requirement may be delayed. Mr McDonald says saliva testing is the logical and easiest test.
For the borders, some kind of dedicated border checkpoint, if you like, or border setup, not right at the border because that will slow everything down, but somewhere either side of the border where simply someone can drive through, dribble in the tube, bag and tag it and drive on so that there's just a minimal delay.
He says there are at least 4,000 truck drivers using the southern border a day and other retail workers crossing the boundary too.
And in a statement, the Ministry of Health says it's finalising a contract with a saliva testing provider, so workers will be able to get tested with that. But a swab is also an option. Additionally, workers won't actually need to show proof of a negative test until next Friday, a week after the relevant law comes into force. They say this gives time to finalise arrangements for cross-boundary testing. Well, Don Braid is the Managing Director of Mainfreight and joins me now. Kia ora, Don. Last week you said you were blindsided by this announcement. How are you feeling about it now?
Well, they've engaged and progress has been excellent, to be perfectly frank with you. And it's amazing what happens when you engage the industry that gets things done anyway. So we've come a long way in the last couple of days.
So you may have heard in that piece we just played, some people with drivers want there to be a testing station near to the checkpoints, not one that's going to hold up a checkpoint, but off to the side somewhere. Is that a reasonable expectation?
Yes, and it appears that the Ministry of Health are working towards doing that and trying to find suitable sites in an effort to do that. But at the same time, they're engaging workplace testing programs as well, so that companies like ourselves and a few others will be able to conduct saliva testing on site well before the drivers get anywhere near the border.
A couple of things there, Don. That obviously works if you're a big company like you guys are, right?
Yep,
but
yep.
The little operators, they're kind of, well, they're left out on a limb, aren't they? Because they don't have the same kind of resources or the same number of drivers. So the expectation is that they'll be sourcing tests outside of their office, if you like.
Yeah, I agree, and that is what they're working hard on, trying to come up some answers with, and hence why there's been delays. And, you know, I think they've come a long way by saying the onus will be on the employer from tomorrow night to actually have processes in place, but testing at the border or checking that testing has been done at the border won't commence until in a week's time, Thursday, Friday next week. So that'll give time for them to set up either pop-up testing. They're also talking about having 24-hour testing as well, so having some sites available that drivers will be able to get to out of normal operating hours.
Do you see that time extension as an opportunity for authorities to get their act together and provide some solutions, or do you think the time extension is for businesses to get their house in order?
There's a bit of both. Thankfully they've realised that it is more difficult than just making a blanket order, and they have put a lot of time into thinking through the logistics of it and consulting with us. I've heard a couple of the interviews that you've done today, and some of the questions that have been raised by some of those smaller operators were answered by the industry meeting this afternoon. And I think you'll find that that'll be out to all those relevant companies probably tomorrow, I suppose, through their communications channel.
So, Don, in all honesty, is this this week of grace, is that because of you?
I don't think it's because of me. I think it's
because...
Well,
and the industry group telling them that it simply wasn't going to work.
Yeah, well, the industry were pretty vocal, and I think we got our message across. I was probably a bit emotional last week because of the lack of consultation. The industry want to be part of this. We're more than happy to have the testing. We've stood up a saliva testing program here on our site today and have done 160 without any issues and probably less than 5 minutes for each saliva test. So it works.
Don, are they going to accept those though? So the ones that you've set up, right? So at the moment they say they're working with a provider, etc., health authorities do. Those tests that you've done, are they going to be acceptable? Are they ticked off for border checks?
That we don't know because they haven't appointed the saliva-based testing company yet.
So you're just preparing and setting up a system, but the reality might be, Don, that you have to run two systems.
Maybe. The Ministry of Health have also asked us to be involved in a pilot program for the saliva-based testing regime that they will appoint supposedly tomorrow. we'd be hoping and have flipped the coin that it might well be the company that we've already engaged the process with.
Who's that, Don?
Rayco Science.
Right.
And we took those tests ourselves as well this morning because we wanted to understand how it was going to work, how it would impact our guys and girls, and that we could get it done efficiently.
So, Don, who then gives you the certification to say that your driver has had the test? If you stand it up yourself, are you giving yourself the piece of paper that says you've had the test?
No, well, Rayco, who are an accredited provider, will have a QR code, which we all have now on our phones, and that QR code is updated with the test, be it negative or positive. And if Rayco is the provider that's appointed, the police will be able to check that QR code as the vehicles cross the border.
Good to talk to you, Don. That is Don Braid, who's the Managing Director of Mainfreight. It is 17 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A petition signed by nearly 14,000 people demanding the government increase the number of mental health workers has been handed to Parliament. It included the signature of one person who contacted nearly 50 private psychologists for help with no success. And as Hamish Cardwell reports, a soaring demand for treatment combined with a shortage of psychologists is causing ballooning wait times with disastrous consequences.
For years, Hattie Plant has suffered from anxiety and depression, but eating disorders like bulimia have been her biggest battle. During last year's lockdown, she developed anorexia, and in April, her condition worsened.
There were 2 occasions where I was basically threatened with, if this gets any worse, you're going to the hospital. Once when my blood pressure plummeted, and once when my heart rate was too low, so I'd be lying awake at night, feeling my heart rate slow down, terrified to sleep because I was worried it would stop in my sleep.
Last October, the Wellington Regional Eating Disorder Service put Hattie on its counselling waitlist. She was told she would begin treatment in 6 to 9 months, but almost a year on, she's still waiting.
Not going to lie, it was a real kick in the gut to have this life-threatening condition and then be told, we might see you in half a year or more.
Phil Houlihan's mental health struggles saw him lose his job. He too has been waiting months for treatment.
It's just sort of put a big stop sign on my life. I can't really get back to work because my doctor said, I'm not ready to go back to work. I'd be sabotaging myself if I did. I want to get back to work. I want to be productive, but I can't because I don't have the skills, and I can't get the skills because there's no one there to teach me. It's really hard to be positive, and it sort of gets rid of hope because I can't see a future at the moment because there's just no help.
Today, in a live-stream ceremony, a petition calling for more resources to train psychologists was handed to Parliament. The organisers collected horror stories of people languishing 6, 9 and 12 months on treatment waiting lists. One person contacted nearly 50 private psychologists to get help, with no success. Green Party MP Chloe Swarbrick received the petition and is part of a cross-party mental health and addiction group. She painted a dire picture of the breadth of the shortage of mental health workers.
We're already 1,000 psychologists short. And the Psychology Workforce Task Force group estimated that an additional 268 psychologists were needed across the 20 DHBs and about 672 more in the primary health and general practice sector to adequately address the need that already exists, let alone that comes forward as we build more of that awareness around this pothole.
She says despite that, there are only about 130 spots in postgrad psychology training each year. She says there are only 12 spots in one university training program, despite getting nearly 10 times that number of applicants. Cross-party group member and Labour Party MP Louisa Wall says in 2019 the government allocated $70 million for workforce development. She says $2 million went to psychology, but it's not enough.
The pothole is a bit bigger than what we've been able to provide currently. And I actually think the rationale for increasing psychologists and the need for community psychology actually is incredibly important.
Louisa Wall says there has been an increase in training of psychologists and funding for Māori and Pacifica scholarships. Petition organiser Lucy McLean says there was only about 20 new internships, practical placements needed to complete a qualification, which would not even make a dent in the problem. She wants the number of psychologists trained each year to be doubled and internships properly funded. In the meantime, she says the massive demand is taking its toll on clinicians who are increasingly leaving the public health system to go into private practice. Ending the petition presentation on a slight up note, this rap homage was played for the counsellors helping Kiwis cope.
Life is a journey, be it young or old, each with a story that yearns to be told, to someone with skills and a safe space to hold. Psychologists really are gold. Life is a journey, be it young or old.
And now to Central Otago, where the Alexandra community is devastated their annual Blossom Festival has been cancelled. It was to be the 65th year of the historic event and is the longest continuously running community festival of its kind, with thousands expected to attend later this month and so much uncertainty around alert levels. Organisers say it's a call that had to be made. Tess Brunton has more.
For many, the Alexandra Blossom Festival is a sign that spring is sweeping away a long, cold winter. The small town of 5,500 people can treble when the iconic floral floats parade through the main street. But the Delta outbreak already meant not as many floats were made and no Auckland entertainers. Event manager Marta McPherson says they wanted to celebrate the festival's 65th year with a bang. Not a whimper.
The festival parade was not going to be looking that flash, and I made a recommendation that it would be better to do nothing than do something which was not up to our usual high standard. And the committee agreed. The sad news is after 64 years, there won't be a 65th. We've had to cancel our festival, which is the hardest call that I've had to make in 40 years in the entertainment industry.
Martin started emailing people early this morning, saying they're disappointed but understanding.
It takes quite a long time to build a floral float, which is literally covered in thousands of handmade paper flowers. And I know there are float builders out there who, like the Lions Club, who've just about got their float finished. But what they'll do with it, they'll cover it up, they'll put it away into a corner of a shed, and it'll come out next year, and they'll freshen it up and do the finishing touches, and we'll have in 2022, we'll have a bigger, brighter and even better festival.
Central Otago Mayor Tim Cadogan remembers coming to the festival as a young boy from Balclutha with his family. He says it's a big loss to the community.
When you come out of winter here in Central Otago, for me, I see my first daffodil and my first lamb and I go, oh, beauty, we're almost out of it, because it does get a bit cold. So for the community, I think it's that celebration of spring, and we'll find different ways to celebrate that this year.
But he's expecting a great festival next year.
I think the community of Otago and Southland, and particularly of Central Otago, next year are going to go, man, we missed that last year, and it's going to go absolutely gangbusters.
The festival can add up to $1 million to the local economy, but Tin Goose Cafe co-owner Alistair Watson says cancelling is the right call to make.
It'll have a significant impact. We probably do triple the business over that weekend, but at the end of the day, if we're down at level 2 now and we're able to earn some income, so, there's a lot of businesses in Auckland that can't operate, so you can't be too upset about it, I suppose.
Avenue Motel co-owner David Burke says Alexandra comes alive during the festival weekend.
It's already starting to have a huge effect on our cancellations. A lot of people will come from out of town purely for the Blossom Festival. For example, I've got 15 units here and 2 units that weren't full for the scheduled date.
Organisers already have their sights on a bigger, better celebration next year.
As most of the country enjoys the new freedoms allowed under Alert Level 2, spare a thought for the hairdressers out there. 3 and a bit weeks of lockdown has resulted in some shaggy manes and some less than successful DIY jobs that now need fixing. Conan Young and cameraman Nathan McKinnon visited Salon E in Christchurch, where the snips are flying to bring some respectability back into people's lives.
Ali Sommer and his team are battling to catch up on 3 weeks' worth of bookings that had to be cancelled because of lockdown. Their job's been made more difficult by some clients who decided to take matters into their own hands.
Some of clients, they were very desperate and used some colour at home. They calling and say, please, I need to come in. Some people, ask their wife to cut their hair, so they need a correction. So it was a bit of that for sure. But no, everybody's very happy to actually feel a little bit of normal life,
Debbie Tennant resisted indulging in any DIY antics during lockdown, but says it feels good to be back in the barber's chair.
Well, the good thing is I haven't been seeing anybody, so no one can see my regrowth, so yeah.
Yeah.
No, lockdown hasn't been too bad. It's been busy, but yeah.
And I saw you were getting a wash there, and that must have been quite nice.
Oh, it's amazing. Just it's good to feel a sense of normality again. Yeah. It's so nice having somebody else do your hair.
No, absolutely. And so, can I ask, what are you having done today?
Just getting rid of the grey, basically. Which they've done a very good job of doing.
So a bit of a light sort of dye through there.
Yeah. Just a touch up and a bit of a trim.
Yeah.
And then I'm all good to go again.
As the PM has been saying at her 1pm briefings, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And it's the same at Salon E, where the 2-metre social distancing rule means they're only able to fit half the number of clients in as normal. It's meant working some long hours to clear their backlog of bookings.
We're working 7 days, a Sunday to Sunday. And then long night every night. And we're just trying to do as much as we can, keep the distance between clients, sanitizers, make sure the clients scan in when they come in. We're wearing masks. We're not giving magazine to clients. Trying to keep it as much as we can, distancing and clean, and do what we have to do to get the money back in the till.
Yeah, sure. And so you're working 7 days a week, and how when do you open and when do you close?
We are opening at 9, so from 9 to 9 a daily now, but on Saturday, Sunday we'll have to close a little bit early because the staff won't be happy with me. So we've got to do what we have to do just to fit as much as client as we can, and then to just go back to kind of normality eventually. But we need to catch up. We lost 3 weeks.
Ali Sorma says he's grateful to be able to open his doors again and that his heart goes out to people in Auckland where level 4 lockdown continues, as well as the wait for a return to the barber's chair.
You should check that one out online. We'll put it up on our Facebook page. Just a quick update from the police. They say that they're bringing in an additional 60 police officers from around the country to be deployed to assist with the Tamaki Makaurau checkpoints. Those staff will be working and accommodated in the Waikato region, which is under level 2 and won't be required to move into alert level 4. There's still 10 checkpoints around Auckland's northern and southern boundaries. They say that there's a few motorists who've tried to do a sneaky one and get through in the 48-hour period from midnight 6th of September to 11:59 on the 7th of September. 28,316 vehicles were stopped and only 274 of them were turned around. That's just 1%. Well, it's less than 1% of the vehicle traffic during this period. So they're pretty happy with compliance there. Some feedback more on the flowers. Daryl says, really sad and crazy about the flower growers. Having worked in nurseries and horticulture, it is callous of MB. It seems typical bureaucratic, faceless answer from them. No engagement. No consideration of the people involved or the human factor here. Very sad, he says. The late news team will keep you updated throughout the night. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi o Pōpō from tomorrow, 5 a.m. on First Up. High performance athletes tell First Up their dreams and livelihoods are being destroyed because they can't travel to international competitions and secure spots in MIQ. Catch you tomorrow.
Kia ora tātou, RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Ko Sarah Thompson tōku ingoa. The arrival of hundreds of seasonal workers from other countries and dozens of fishery workers has been deferred to make more space in managed isolation. The government says the Crown Plaza Hotel is safe to open up to both community close contacts and recent overseas arrivals. The wage subsidies bill has passed $1.2 billion and a 2-year ban is being placed on scallop fishing off the east coast of the Coromandel Peninsula. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Catherine Ryan, introducing 9 to Noon's first ever short story competition. Judged by writers Tina Makareti and Harry Ricketts. It's open to anyone aged 16 and over.